So that is not how we need to work this. So we need to have a plan on what's next. What are we doing with all this knowledge and brilliant ideas and the momentum and everybody's eagerness to make a systemic change? What are we going to do with this? So this session is going to be led by our meal exchange staff and some of the students on talking about what next steps can be and where are we going with this. Next slide, please. So once again, there'll be a few things that I'm repeating over yesterday and today. So why policy? What is the importance? Why are we not just continuing doing what Meal Exchange has always done in the past, is work with students in getting more better access to food on campuses? Why are we today having a broader conversation around food security, around policy? That's really important. The main thing is because we need a systemic change. We cannot just rely on small changes, of today's changes, having a better food bank or having more bandit solutions. We need systemic changes to the problem that's going to actually address food security and affordability for post-secondary students. And that is why the importance of having a policy conversation. That is why, even if it is a small policy, it's still a policy level conversations. Post-secondary students, it's a really interesting demographic here because uh, this is a very transient demographic. The students come in first year, and some of them finish third year, fourth year, and then they're gone. A new batch of students come in. Even in your third and fourth year, the students are so busy with education that they really forget about the rest of the things that really helps them, or the trouble and the issues they face. So even from a food service provider mentality, all we used to do is think, oh, you just got to wait till April and then the students are gone. Next year, we got to start from scratch. And that challenge stays. So having those immediate and short-term solutions to food security is just not working anymore. We need conversations around policy. We need conversations around systemic change. And that is why Meal Exchange is focusing on policy this year and in the next few years. Next slide. So Summit Learning, I'm going to pass on to two of our team members, Brittany and Rohini, to just summarize on a very high level, what did we learn from the summit in the last couple of days? Brittany and Rohini, take it over.
All right, thank you, Suman, for that. I must say, after these 2 days of hearing all these diverse perspectives and approaches, there's just a whole reservoir of new inspiration and new things that not just me, but I'm sure all of you have acquired. So for this little, we're going to try to the best of our ability to give you a little bit of a recap of some of the key points and takeaways that might help you move forward as you're thinking ahead and thinking of how you can implement everything you've learned. Brittany has outlined for us about 10 bullet points of things that you might want to note down. Brittany, if you want to share those.
Yeah, sure. So I've done my best listening to all of these sessions, and my brain is full with all of this new knowledge that I have, to come up with like a list of high level key themes that I think that all of the speakers have touched upon, or at least most of them. So to start off with, I think like the power of youth voices, the energy that youth and post-secondary students bring to these conversations, and the passion, and the potential, if we do mobilize and get ourselves together, to actually create change. So the first thing there really being that there is power in youth. It's just about channeling that power and focusing on particular issues that we want to put our voices behind. The second really interesting thing, I think, is is that you don't have to be a policy expert to get involved with policy. I think, myself, I've attended many universities and still don't feel like an expert at anything. And sometimes you just have to like start doing the thing rather than keep studying it, and do your best. Be willing to learn, listen to other people who have different perspectives, ask questions, and reach out to folks, and don't be shy to reach out, especially politicians. Like, that's what they're there for. That's part of our democracy, is having these people as our representatives. So lean into that and reach out. I mean, it's amazing to hear from Gurneet today about her drive to reach out to our politicians, and to work together with other people, because you're not going to know everything, they're not going to know everything, but how does our knowledge come together to push things forward? So that comes to the next point, is really don't go it alone. Work with allies in your community, form groups, whether you're working on your campus, and we heard some pretty awesome campus stories today, or whether you're working to get some policy change at the municipal level, provincial level, or the federal level. Find out who's going to be in your corner, work together, maybe even look for some of those unlikely allies. Finding your champions, whether it's in campus administration, food services, or at a higher level, your MPPs, your MP, who's going to be your champion that can bring your voice and your issues to some spaces that you might not actually have access to. So how do you build relationships with those folks, figure out who they are, and do the work to develop that over time, and keep up the momentum so that they know that it's at the top of their plate. Another really important thing that I came up today is to not antagonize or expect that the other person is going to be able to do all of the things that you want them to do, but really show your enthusiasm, and try not to water down what you're asking for, but understand that there are barriers and constraints that they might be facing, even if they have the same determination as you do to get things to happen. So really working together, working across party boundaries. Just because a government changes over doesn't mean that there can't be action on your particular issue. That just might have to be changed in the way that it's approached, or I think, like one of the speakers said today, it might have to be called or named a different thing. Let me think. The other thing that I thought was really interesting was to hear about around the topic of how that tuition, the free tuition, came to be with USA at the helm, and thinking about how do you come prepared with well-researched ideas that are clear, not too many issues, but like really specific on what you want, and demonstrating the positive impact that might come from this change. What are the good stories that either administration at your campus or the government is going to be able to get from this? Like, what political opportunities are there, and how can you talk about what positive thing this change is going to bring? Some stories and some emotion, but also some real hard data to back that up. And then I think another really interesting thing is to frame within the priorities, whether that's the government and looking at mandate letters, platforms, or if it's with your campus, looking at what commitments have they signed? Did they sign on to the Okanagan Charter? Did they sign on to the Sustainable Development Goals, or any of these other larger charters that guide their actions? And if they have, how do you hold them to account to those promises that they've been making, and really framing your ask within that? Another interesting thing is, just reach out, talk to folks, whether it's emails, letters, social media, talking to their assistants. I think Suman talks about this a lot, is how often we talk about food security, but actually we're not talking to people who can make those changes. Like, we're not talking to governments. They actually don't get a lot of letters or questions about food security. And so maybe that's something that if we start to elevate it and they know that it's an issue, then they're more likely going to be to know that that's something that they should pay attention to. I'm almost on my list, I promise. The other really interesting thing I think is long-term planning. So like anything from even small changes on your campus, in campus policy, making student initiative, food initiatives happen, or like long-term, larger scale advocacy policies, all of that is going to take time and planning and research, and it's going to be well longer than your length of time involved in whatever that is. And so how can you think about like what's come before me, and how can I move that forward, and what's going to come next, and how can I set up the conditions so that this can go forward? So using tools like theory of change and strategic planning, really being strategic about what you're asking for, so that it can happen well beyond your time frame of being involved, and to just know that that's what you're contributing. You don't have to see the end product to be like an integral part of that really important process in any of this long-term important change. Yeah, and then the last thing, which I thought was really exciting, is get involved with organizations that are already doing some of this work and already excited about it. So as you heard from our first speakers today, a number of them have seen successes on their campuses and changes in their campus policy from working with meal exchange, students seeing support in some of the initiatives that they're taking on from working with meal exchange. And we also heard about the Healthy School Food Coalition and how important having that organization was for policy change. So really looking at not just government, but what are the organizations out there that are also in this work, and how can you work together? Yeah, I think that's the high level themes that I had. But if anyone learned anything else interesting or picked out some themes that I didn't, I would highly encourage you to drop those in the chat. Like, what are you coming out of this session, these sessions thinking about, so that we could all, hear what others' reflections were from this time together. I think I'm passing it over to Maya to talk a little bit about meal exchange's policy direction.
Thank you so much, Brittany. So moving forward, given what we've learned over the past 2 days in our sessions in the summit, now it's we're setting our eyes on having those discussions around policy, deciding kind of a direction, getting everyone involved, figuring out what post-secondary student food policy is going to look like in Canada. And as Suman mentioned, day one, right out of the gate, there are countries in the world who have successfully implemented different ways of addressing student food insecurity at a post-secondary level, at a national level as well. And so actually Meal Exchange over the summer has done a little bit of research on post-secondary food policies beyond our border. We've found that Finland and France are frontrunners in this field, and we've also found some pretty interesting ideas beyond there as well. So next slide, please. So beginning with Finland, Finland's approach focuses on meal subsidies. It's had a somewhat long history of providing food subsidies for higher education students since 1979. And since then, they've expanded who qualifies and the extent of the program. So currently, students are entitled to discounted meals at 320 restaurants across Finland. It averages out at about €2.30 subsidy per meal. Because it's in the form of a discount off of the meal on the menu, the price does vary. But that's the average subsidy per meal. And it's a total annual budget of 32 million euros that goes towards food subsidies for post-secondary students. The meals that are on these menus at the restaurants.
32 million euros to go towards subsidies for food programs for students, when you could think about it even in longer term and like try to implement like on campus or around campus food sourcing. Right. Like $32 million. In euros, that's like 60 million.
Yep, absolutely. Sorry.
It's crazy to think about that, because like a lot of policy that's implemented, it comes over time, like not everybody's super savvy about like the salient of these issues when it comes to like what they do to create for individuals, right? But usually intersectional issues. But government response is basically standard solutions that are implemented by like the natural, like the traditional business as usual model. So like subsidization is a traditional model, rather than actually it's creating sovereignty and agency in those programs. Government can actually like pay that $32 million to start implementing like autonomous production processing and distribution programs. And there are some places that don't have like the arable land or like, but there are other models that you can actually incorporate in, so like that's another way that government can actually start putting money into fixing the problem, like solving the problem and being used rather than just subsidizing that shift, which is like fucking garbage, to be honest. There's like all of it's like money goes, you know, when they are moving.
Sorry, I'm getting a lot of static and I'm not understanding much what you're saying. I don't know who's speaking. So if you don't mind just typing it in the chat, and we'll let Maya finish her presentation and then we can have that conversation.
Yeah,
Because I couldn't
absolutely.
understand much at all.
And it was a little hard to hear, but some of the stuff that I could hear sounded like some really valid points. I'm just going to wrap up this little just summary of the research that we did. Again, this is Finland's approach. This is just an example of how another country has chosen to address post-secondary food insecurity. But this is just an example and to kind of inspire maybe our conversations around food policy in Canada. So this is their Finland's approach. So just continuing, picking up from where I left off, the meals that are offered at the restaurant, they're guided by nutrition recommendations set by the State Nutrition Advisory Board as well. So these restaurants that offer the subsidy are required to have at least one meal on the menu that meets a set of recommendations, including that it's a well-balanced meal, that it provides a minimum of a third of the energy requirements daily, and that's also set at an affordable price even before the subsidy. As well, in terms of who qualifies for meal subsidies in Finland, it's anyone who is completing an undergraduate or master's level at any university in Finland, as well as polytechnic institutions, as well as any equivalent in an occupational program. So it's very inclusive. You don't even have to be a Finnish citizen as long as you are studying in Finland. So there's a real emphasis, it sounds like, coming out of Finland on making sure that any student, post-secondary student in Finland is having access to good quality, affordable meals. If you could go to the next slide, please. Oh, can we have the next? Thank you. So France had a similar approach. Back to France, please. Thank you. France had a similar approach, and actually, as of just this year, January 2021, students are actually entitled to 2 meals per day at only €1 each, and these are from cafeterias or university restaurants. They're run by an organization called CRU, which is the Regional Center for University and School Works. So it's student-run, but financially aided by the French government. And again, there's a focus on balanced meals and the promotion of vegetarian options here as well. To sort of complement the meal subsidies, there's also a charity organization called Restos du Cœur, which is very active in France, providing free grocery packs. For the grocery packs, some additional documentation is required to justify financial need, but as for the meal subsidies, you need only show your student ID, prove that you're a student. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and then it's just some other ideas coming out of our research. Finland and France stood out as having the most cohesive approaches, but many Chinese universities are in the last few years focusing on preserving student dignity of those in need of financial aid related to food by providing discrete automatic meal subsidies to their meal dollars account without the students having to apply for aid. Coming out of Scotland, we see a lot of investment in food education at all ages and a general kind of cultural push for access to quality food for all, as well as not specific to food policy, but in terms of highly, if not totally subsidized tuition costs. Norway, Iceland, Denmark, and Sweden are all frontrunners in this field. Next slide, please. Okay, so given this research, moving forward with these discussions on policy, when it comes to figuring out what kind of policy we want to see in Canada that addresses post-secondary food insecurity, there are 2 kind of main points, part of Meal Exchange's vision. Number 1, that student voice comes first. Students are the ones who are living through the direct impacts of food insecurity, and they're the ones who will be directed first and foremost by any new policy put into place. So going forward, as we build policy and as we have these consultations and these discussions, it's really important that as students have a say and that our voices are uplifted. And the second point as well, actually, is in our federal policy session, one of our panelists, Debbie Field, mentioned the importance of engaging the voices of everyone involved for the policy to be effective and to last a long time and to do what it's intended to do. So that means that when we're having these discussions on policy, we're really wanting to put an emphasis on collaboration and inclusive discussions. And I'm going to pass it off. Thank you.
Thanks, Maya. That's great to hear about what's going on in other countries and help inspire us to think about what we might do. So just a high level kind of overview of what Meal Exchange is thinking about and where we think we're going. So first of all, as you mentioned, Maya, we're looking to hear what student policy priorities are. So we want to hear from you. We want to hear from your peers. We want to hear from other students that are facing these issues and are aware of what students are experiencing. And we're starting that experience here at Summit, as well as we just ran a national survey that had some questions regarding this. So on the next slide, I'll show you a little bit more about that. And we're going to be having more and more of these conversations. So please get involved in them and share your insight and your thoughts on where we should go. We're also going to be forming policy working groups for students to get involved and really help shape the next step of what this is going to look like. Policy groups that'll be working on both federal and provincial policies, and depending on what students in which jurisdictions show enthusiasm to start working on this, that will help us decide where our focus is going to be. And so really, if you're feeling really passionate about this after the summit, like, get involved, reach out, and we have a form that we're going to ask you to fill out to evaluate the summit, but that'll also ask you if you're interested in being involved in this work and how, so that we can start getting to work on this together. As we've heard from many of the speakers, it requires a lot of people coming together, a lot of people who have experience with these issues, sharing their stories, and really coming with a lot of passion and energy. So if you are passionate about this stuff, I highly recommend that you get involved. From there, once we start forming these ideas and working groups to start really dive down into what it is that we want to ask the government for, we'll then go through a process of like researching the viability, feasibility of these different policy options and prioritizing which seems like they might be the most impactful, which have the most student backing behind them, etc. All of that work is going to come forward to our next summit, which is going to be in the spring, where we're going to have presentations on a number of the policy options that seems like they have the most potential to be successful. And we're going to facilitate conversation at that spring summit that will help students decide on our direction that we're really going to then bite into and develop policy briefs and advocacy strategies based on. Hopefully, if we don't end up in other lockdowns, we're going to have an in-person summit, and I can't wait for that. I've been really missing in-person conferences. And the last Meal Exchange in-person summit was when I first started with Meal Exchange 2.5 years ago, almost longer than that now. And it was such a really inspiring place to come together and have really amazing conversations and get to know folks. So I really hope that we can do that again, and that will launch off the next phase of this policy work. But there's tons to do between now and then. So if you at all want to help shape where we're going, please get involved. Can you go to the next slide, please? So just to start off, asking students what it is that they want to see. We put a survey out nationally across the country, and we got over 6,000 respondents. The top policy options that are coming through this survey, and of course this is only 6,000 students so far, but these are the top things that are coming up, are tuition supports at almost 20%. So we've already heard about that today. Like, students spend a lot of their money going to tuition, and it's not really a negotiable expense. So that often comes at the cost of food and other things. And another really important way to address food insecurity is more affordable food and meals on campus, because students, when they're there, as we've heard today, especially in the campus stories session, that we're kind of captive audiences, and we don't really have a lot of choice in what we eat and what we can afford to eat. And so if those meals were more affordable and better for us, I think that would be a significant support. So those are two options that came up. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more. And even within those, we would have to dive into how do we actually create policy briefs and suggestions based on these, but those are the top things that we're seeing so far. If you have other opinions or really feel passionate about either of those, please get involved. Can you go to the next slide? I keep saying get involved, and now here's my get involved slide. So as you heard in the very first session, we have HelloFresh as our sponsor for Summit. And so if you fill out this Summit evaluation form, and Melody, could you drop the link in the chat, please? You're gonna get a free HelloFresh box. And actually I'm signing up for HelloFresh for the first time. So we'll see if I feel good about it. But you get to try it too. So share your input and you'll get a free HelloFresh box, but you can also please share your input on like what you're excited about policy-wise, if you want to get involved, how you want to get involved. I think there's room for everyone, no matter your experience level. As we heard today, you do not have to be an expert to get involved in this work. So show up. You know, if you have limited capacity or particular skills, think of maybe reflect on what those skills, interests, and capacities are, and reflect that when you reach out to get involved. We also have a call out here that Rohini added to this list. We're looking for a student ambassador from Quebec. So if you're interested in that opportunity, please go to our website, and there's a career page, and apply to that there. That's our student ambassador for Canada's Food Guide. If you have any other questions, please reach out to Maya, who can be found at policy@mealexchange.com. Can we go to the next slide? So to end this session today, we're going to have breakout rooms, and we're going to discuss what policy options are exciting us, what do we think Meal Exchange should focus on, how do students want to get involved, what do they see that looking like. And so we're going to do some breakout rooms for about 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and wrap up for the day. So if Melody, could you open up the breakout rooms? We're going to have 3 options. If you want a bilingual room, go to option 3. So if you speak French or French and English, or a little bit of French, you just want to listen and learn, go to room 3, where Rohini will be available. Otherwise, come to either room 1 or 2, and we're going to give some feedback on Jamboard and also have a discussion this way too. So, hey everyone, thanks for, I had so many great ideas and thoughts come up in that session. Really excited for the Meal Exchange team to take time to dive back into all of those thoughts and discuss it further. I'm just going to go through some high-level things that we talked about, maybe give that opportunity to you folks as well. So maybe Rohini and Suman, if you each want to talk about what happened just briefly in your rooms, and then I'll turn it over to Suman to finish us off for the day. Some of the thoughts that came out that are mimicking some of the things that came out today, you know, talking about the need to regulate international student fees, capping that maybe at the provincial level, talking about how to have procurement policies maybe at the provincial level that can control sustainable local food going through public institutions like universities. You know, how do we maybe subsidize meals, especially for students that have health issues or students in poverty, and what might that look like to have like meal tickets or something like that. There were a lot of thoughts about campus level policy change, you know, making sure that food on campus is informed by the student body, that it's culturally appropriate, that it's healthy, that it's actually what students want, that students have access to kitchens and equipment to take up their own food initiatives if they want to, and really tackling that monopoly or the policies that prevent students from having their own food initiatives on campus. So that's some campus level policy change. At the federal level, we kind of talked a little bit about what would it look like to have students more involved in the consultation that is happening for the local food policy, or the Canadian food policy, sorry. So those advisory councils, what would it look like to have youth and post-secondary student voices on that, and then what would come out of that? So that's just some high-level stuff that we talked about. There's more to dive into there, and we started to talk about as well, what would it look like for Meal Exchange to organize more of these kinds of summit, whether it's online or in person, where we really give the space for student voices and to hear their thoughts on the different policy options in real time to really dive into those ideas. yeah, and the importance of those spaces. So I don't want to take up too much more time, so I'll leave it there, and excited to hear from other folks. Rohini, what did you guys talk about?
Yeah, so we had a super interesting discussion actually. So of course we touched upon some of the things talked about today, but what was interesting is that we kind of expanded the scope of food insecurity. Most of us are students and we face a very, there's a reality we face. But a point that was brought up is that ensuring food security starts at a much earlier stage too. And Swati was her name in our room, brought up a point how there used to be home ec, where kids at an early age would learn skills such as food literacy or how to make meals, and how we need to put more of a focus on that, how this is student food insecurity, especially at a post-secondary level. A lot of that could be mitigated early on already. So it's really kind of this, when it comes to policy making, it doesn't directly have to target the post-secondary age group. Rather, it's something that we can start earlier on, whether that's in elementary school or at every stage, actually. And there was another interesting point about especially nowadays, we don't eat together as much. We don't have that social connectedness, and whether that's traditionally we would think, okay, there's a family dinner where you kind of develop relationships, and statistically speaking, those who do have family meals, it's more conducive later on. But then Maya brought up the point of saying, well, we also have this great opportunity on an academic setting at universities where people can eat together, students can eat together. So maybe if you don't have that opportunity at home to have family meals, we can foster this kind of social connectedness on campuses, which ultimately would also maybe not eliminate, but reduce a lot of the mental health components that food insecurity tags along, for example. Maya, is there something else that you think I missed?
No, I think that's kind of sums it up. I think just a main point to keep in mind is that keep whatever policy that meal exchange builds, or whatever policy that we see implemented, keeping that holistic kind of approach with regard to mental health and social and community connections, as well as just physical access to food, right? So I think that that's something that we need to see going forward.
Cool. I think that was it for our room. Suman, do you want to share some of your insights?
I can share for our
Brian.
room. That's okay. Yeah, a lot of the similar themes came up that you already touched on. In terms of the first question, what kind of policies would you like to see address student food insecurity? We talked a lot about the connection to mental health as well as moving away from food services falling under a business model and moving towards the student life designation on campus, because if it did that, it would free up more funds and give more flexibility to what the food service could actually do on campus. So kind of advocating toward that, more involvement from the student union, being more vocal about what students are actually saying on campus and what their needs are, more options, vegan, halal, kosher, all of those things, more variety of food on campus. And then also someone brought up the point of standardized food prices on campus so that the healthier food doesn't cost more than the less healthy food on campus, that everything's just a standard price. And then someone also brought up a point of food access being under student power. So how, like, even accessing farmland or accessing, those sort of means, how do you go about doing that? So really interesting points that came up there. And then in terms of the second question, what sort of role you see in the exchange playing, a lot of conversations about toolkits, how people can get involved, what are people's first steps. I think those are a lot of questions that came up today as well, with asking the panelists, like, what can we do? How do we get there? So things like that, and more opportunities to volunteer and connect with like-minded folks, especially with distance learning. It can feel very disconnected. So just having those spaces available to know that you're not doing this work sort of in your own bubble, that it's a a nationwide effort, I think would be really great. Some things that came up, and then getting involved in our newsletters, updates, town halls, all those sort of things. So yeah, I think that was everything.
That's awesome. Thank you. That was very well summarized and really 15 minutes very well spent. Some great ideas. Thank you all. So we are going to wrap up. We're in the process. We're going to wrap up this fantastic couple of days. We had a lot of knowledge being shared, a lot of amazing speakers, and a lot of involvement from all of you who participated. So thank you so very much. A couple of things that I am not going to forget personally from this last couple of days is you do not need to be a policy buff or a policy PhD to actually get involved. Anybody can. You just need to passionately feel about the issue and the problem that we have in hand. So that was something that was really important. And be ready for even a very small achievable goals, one step at a time. Policy work takes years and years and years. So not to be disappointed by that, but also to understand that let's take that one small step and take that small wins, and then we slowly keep adding those small wins to make a proper good policy, which is absolutely doable. The other thing that I learned, which was really, which stays with me quite a lot, is suggesting a policy or a systemic change. It's not about always yelling about the problem. Anybody can. And if you keep on yelling about the problem, it'll of course fall into deaf ears because nobody wants problems. To make a systemic change, we need to think, we need to understand the problem and come up with a solution that your elected officials or your campus can actually digest. So in an economy like today's economy, if we go to either the federal government or the provincial government and say that we need $1 billion for food to be affordable or better on campuses, there's a good chance nobody's going to speak to us. There's a good chance it's going to fall in deaf ears because nobody has money. Government is now, over the next 2-3 years, going to try to cut on spending as much as possible. But they still need wins. So if we can come to them and say, hey, we've got an idea, you can do XYZ by doing ABC, which you don't need to add money to it, but you can just rejig something, or at least do something without financial implication, maybe they will listen better. You need to also understand who are the champions, which MPs, for example, I'm talking federal, if it is on your campus, then which deans, which professors, or if it's provincial, then which MPPs really feel about your cause, really understand either food security or poverty, if that is what you want to talk about, or who is the MP or MPP of the riding where your campus is located, because they will have a vested interest. So it's really important to find a champion and then proceed with them in a very cautious way. So there are various strategies how we can attain our goal. And at Meal Exchange, that is our role, to guide you and help you through the process. So all of you, please fill up the form. We are here to guide you, help, get involved in the conversation. Over the next few months, we will digest from everything we learned from this summit and from your feedback from the form, as well as the survey that we just completed. And we're going to figure out a couple of policies that we're going to focus on in the new year and in spring. And then we're going to come back in the spring summit and actually flush that out and have a proper plan on how to proceed on each of that. So it's really, really very important to hear from you and to get your involvement. As I said earlier, HelloFresh is our sponsor to this, and HelloFresh has decided to give everybody who attends the conference and fills out this form a box of free food. I know Brittany has said that she's just going to start. I'm guilty. I have started for a while now. HelloFresh every week, and we are happy. It's so easy, good, fresh food. It works for us. So please don't forget to fill up the form and follow us on social media at Meal Exchange on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, mealexchange.com on our website. And please sign up for our newsletter to know what's happening. We need your help. We need you because it's only together we can make an impact. So thank you all for coming. Have a very good weekend. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.